Hello everybody and welcome to Module 11. This module is unique in that there's no new reading assignment. This module is going to be dedicated to writing. My plan here is simply to remind you of a few of the elements of good writing and reasoning that we have already discussed, and then to give you a couple of checklists to run your work up against. Take advantage of the fact that there's a new reading assignment for this module to really pour yourself into your essays. So here's a good pre-writing checklist for you. Of course, if you're on top of things, you have probably already begun writing this essay. Nevertheless, this should be handy not just for this essay, but for future projects you may have to do as well. Do you have a thesis in mind? Have you narrowed your thesis down sufficiently? I remember that when doing my doctoral thesis, I suggested topics to my advisor that seemed rather tame to me, and he would say, "You have a nice topic here for 3 different theses." And remember, a doctoral thesis is often as large as a sizable book. So the message here is to narrow your thesis down. You want to give more detail and depth about a narrower topic rather than treat a larger topic superficially. Have you read enough background information to formulate an opinion and begin to generate arguments and justifications? Ideally, you should have read a couple pieces before sitting down and writing your own piece. If you used one of the note-taking methods discussed in previous modules, especially if you use the Curry method I endorsed, you may have already written a bit about one of the pieces you have read when summarizing its arguments and generating arguments of your own. If you did this, then even if you haven't started to officially write your own essay yet, you may have quite a bit of the work out of the way. You may even be able to cut and paste sections of your summary into your essay and then edit them so that they fit. Have you thought about your audience? What background assumptions and worldviews does your audience likely possess? Are they going to be hostile towards your point of view? Curious? Neutral? With what tone should you approach your audience? Essays for classes are a bit of a special case. When writing for an instructor, the situation can be a bit different than when writing for a journal, a paper, a blog, or a book, or a larger group of people. Never be afraid to ask your instructor how you should think about audience for a paper. Chances are she or he will only be impressed by the fact that you even asked the question. In many cases, if you have an assigned topic, you want to demonstrate that you have mastery over the material. This is what makes pieces for instructors a bit different. So even though you are writing to an expert yourself, you don't want to assume your audience is an expert. Usually a good rule of thumb is to approach such pieces as if you're writing to a peer who isn't in the class. Somebody who you would have to explain material to in order for it to make sense, but somebody who is at your education level and advancement in whatever program you're part of. In the case of this assignment, you are supposed to be writing an extended argument. You are writing an argumentative essay. Pretend that you are writing to your peer group. In fact, you are, since you'll be sharing parts of your essay in the forums for feedback purposes. Coastline has a very diverse student body. This is great. So writing for this audience is very much like writing for the audience that might be reading a newspaper or magazine or even a blog. Assume that the audience is roughly your level of education, but doesn't necessarily know the specific information that you know about the subject you're researching. They may know about the general topic, but not necessarily about your specific research. So you may have to explain background concepts and terms. So, for example, if you're arguing about what is sometimes called partial birth abortion, your audience probably knows what abortion means, but they might not know exactly the definition of partial birth abortion. How late are these procedures done? What are their purposes? Under what conditions? These are the sorts of things you will have to explain along with the specifics of whatever argument you present. Do you have an outline? If not, I highly suggest that you try making one. Students tend to think that these are wasted work. In truth, they save you effort and work. Once you do this, make sure that you put the outline sections down as headings on your page as soon as you start writing. Are parts of your essay still to be worked out yet? You may not have everything figured out before you start writing. This can be okay. Sometimes your thoughts will become more clear on the page. But if you don't know exactly where you are going, you should be prepared to delete a great deal of material and perhaps to change directions entirely. This is another reason why an outline helps. It might be best to try to work out the elements of your arguments as part of the outline itself. Try not to think about your arguments in your outline as small sections, but write them word for word as if you were writing them for an essay. Try to word them as well as you can. The nice thing about word processors is that you can cut and paste work from one file to another. Even before word processors, people would do this. Many writers would put their work on cards so that they could easily reorganize their work before writing final draft. And again, I highly suggest that you take your outline headings and put them down as headings in your new document before doing any writing at all. That way you can jump around and write and edit in any area you like. This is one of the ways in which outlines can really save you time. Introduction checklist. First thing isn't first. I have this as the first checklist because it's the first part of a piece when somebody reads it, but it's not the first part you have to write. Remember that the introduction is supposed to serve as a sort of roadmap. Imagine the difference between trying to give somebody directions to a place that you've never been before, but think you know the way to, and to a place that you've carefully driven to. Once you've already driven through the piece, so to speak, your introductions or directions section of the piece is bound to be much better. In fact, this is so important to stress that now that I have mentioned the introduction checklist so that you know it isn't forgotten, I'm going to skip it and put this section after the section following the conclusion. Body of the essay. Have you introduced all the necessary background for your audience to understand the piece? It's easy to forget to explain key elements or assumptions regarding your topic. You want to make sure that you clarify everything that needs clarification. Is your presentation orderly? By this I mean, do the earlier parts of your paper explain the concepts that are used in the later parts of the paper instead of the other way around? In other words, do you present the concepts in such a way that you don't have to do any backwards explaining? Have you justified every claim that the opponent might reasonably object to? This is especially important for any claims you make which act as a premise for the major theses of your essay. And this is how a very narrow topic can grow to be of great length. Let me present a warning here against what might be called the shotgun approach to argumentation as well. Sometimes when people argue for a position, they just throw every argument they can think about a position and hope that one might stick. They devote 1 or 2 sentences to each argument and move on, never really defending them or developing them in detail. This is not a good style of argumentation. A bad pile of undeveloped arguments is a bad pile of undeveloped arguments. A whole heap of bad, undeveloped arguments is not as valuable as one good one. What is more, none of these arguments are then defended against surface-level objections. Now, it's possible that an undeveloped argument may be developed into a good one. That is to say, an undeveloped argument in a piece may be a diamond in the rough. Maybe you can find evidence and support and consider counter-arguments and so forth and turn it into a good argument. But you can't expect your reader to do that for you. It is up to you to polish your own gems here, because if you are trying to convince your audience of some fact, they are probably not going to be doing the work for you. You have to show them the wisdom of your reasoning. For a paper this size, you should really develop 1 or at most 2 arguments. 1 is probably better. You may also then have some sub-arguments defending your position against possible objections. If you have 4 or 5 arguments that you are making, it is time to put on your editor's hat, choose which arguments you think are the strongest, and then develop those at length. Leave the others for another time. Is your evidence trustworthy? Do you use good sources? Do you cite them? Have you checked all your evidence as opposed to simply relying upon long-term memory or what you think common sense facts are, or what you think you remember as just being sort of true general knowledge? Do you anticipate objections an opponent might make to your piece? You want to make sure that you constantly think about what somebody who disagrees with you might say in response to your piece. After all, you don't need to convince people who already agree with you. And people who disagree with you are going to be looking for reasons why you might be wrong. Therefore, you should be looking for the weakest part of your own argument yourself so that you can evaluate and strengthen them, or throw them out if it turns out that you think that they're too weak. And you respond to these objections. Once you find any weak spots in your position, you should do your best to address them, but face them head on. Don't knock over straw men or present weakened versions of the argument your opponents might make. If you don't think your arguments work, then you might have to throw them out. Conclusion checklist. Does your conclusion, in some sense, re-articulate your thesis? Does it, in some sense, encapsulate the reasons for supporting your position? If you have many points, not everything need be mentioned again, but you want to give your reader a good reminder of how you got from point A to point B. The longer the paper, the more thorough this reminder needs to be. Are there any unanswered questions or areas for further investigation you want to draw your reader's attention to? Maybe your paper presents reasons for accepting a conclusion that raises some new interesting questions that you don't have time to address, but which you want the reader to think about. For example, what is the final thought you would like to leave your reader with? Okay, now finally back to the introduction checklist. Now that you've written a draft of the rest of your paper, you know with a degree of detail where it is going. In the editing process, you might make some substantial changes. If you think that they will be very substantial, you may wish to hold off even longer before writing an introduction. Otherwise, you may wish to add an introduction to your rough draft now. When you write it, keep in mind the goals of the introduction. Did you state your thesis clearly? Is it narrow? Did you provide the reader with a clear idea of where you are going with the piece? Would a reader know, just from reading the introduction, what you are arguing for and how? Would you know if you are arguing against a position or in favor of one, for example? Or if you are going to do something complex, like present a position, present a common argument against it, and then show why you think that common argument fails. In short, does the reader know your intentions? Remember that this isn't a mystery novel. Twist endings are not a plus for informative nonfiction. Have you set a tone for the piece? Are you being scholarly, entertaining, irreverent, ironic? In this piece, you probably want to employ some variation of scholarly, since you're going to be including some elements of research into your piece. But there is still a spectrum of tones and levels of humors that may be appropriate depending upon your approach and topic. Are there any limits you want to place on the inquiry? This is part of narrowing your thesis. Oftentimes one issue bleeds into many other issues, but discussing them all would be impossible for your piece. You may wish, therefore, to specifically point out that you know that your argument may have implications for another particular area, but that you are focusing your discussion on just one issue or set of issues. For example, suppose a person is arguing about whether or not true psychopaths can tell right from wrong. Suppose this person is arguing that they cannot, and that thus they should always be found not guilty by reason of mental defect in courts of law. This person might limit his argument to that of making a legal point, and state at the beginning that he understands that such a change would require shifts of resources of mental health institutions and perhaps also require the generation of many new policies, since currently psychopathy cannot be cured, but that these issues go beyond the scope of the paper, which simply presents a legal argument in light of modern neurological evidence. This person may think that these issues can be easily overcome, or that serious structural changes need to be made, or even that the current legal system is in a pickle of being legally duty-bound to present a finding while being in a position of having difficulty implementing that particular finding. There are lots of reasons to limit the scope of one's paper. Does your introduction, as far as possible, pique your reader's interest? And I say as far as possible because this isn't a piece of fiction where you want to try to thrill your reader. You can pique your reader's interest by convincing him or her of the importance of your topic. If you can do that, then you've done a good job. Finally, remember that you're not limited to the 5-paragraph essay model. An introduction may need to be more than one paragraph depending on what you're trying to do. Okay, that wraps up this presentation. The little book I have imaged here, and it is a little book, very tiny, is one that I recommend to students who wish to improve their writing. This tiny book can be very useful in college. It is a classic called The Elements of Style. As mentioned, it's a very tiny book, in some ways like a pamphlet, and it contains very condensed rules of grammar and hints for good writing style. You can get it from between $5 and $7 on Amazon, depending on the edition you buy. Probably cheaper if you buy it used. I'm not getting anything from plugging this book. I just found it to be useful. It is not quite as necessary in a world where you can just Google grammar rules as you need them, but you might still find it to be surprisingly handy to have a book with the condensed rules of grammar as well as a general guide for style within easy reach. Until next time.